it is Tamara. Thank you so much for coming back to my channel. Welcome back. Today we're going to be talking about dissociative amnesia, but I'm going to highlight the different kinds of dissociative amnesia that you could possibly experience if you're, still struggling with a traumatic situation, if you're still struggling with a history of your traumatic childhood. I want to highlight some kinds of memory loss that you are likely to experience. So let's go ahead and jump in. Let's not waste any time. Thank you so much for all of you who are subscribed and participating. And for those who are new, I encourage you to hit that subscribe button so you can stick around with us and be a part of our growing and validating community. And in case you don't know who I am, let me briefly introduce myself. My name is Tamara, and I'm an internationally and board certified trauma therapist, but I'm also licensed in mental health, and I specialize in treating children, adolescents, families, as well as adults who are dealing with trauma and mental health. A couple of days ago, I did a video on dissociative disorders, and I focused on quite a bit of detail in that particular video, but one thing I left out was the various kinds of memory loss that you're likely to experience if you're someone who's dealing with dissociative amnesia. And you can find a little bit more information right up here in this video that I did on dissociative disorders. I encourage you to go check that out after this video. So that you can get a little bit of background. But, when it comes to, trying to manage a traumatic situation, it's really difficult processing it emotionally and psychologically. So, what ends up happening is, internalized or repressed emotions, thoughts, and behaviors, it ends up coming out in a somatic way. So, if it's not your body aching, if it's not fibromyalgia or arthritis, if it's not Parkinson's disease or some other medical condition, then it's probably going to be memory loss. And that's likely to happen if you're not getting treated, or if you're not aware of how your body processes stress and trauma. So let's go ahead and talk about memory. Let's define this a little bit. So the first thing, if you have a dissociative amnesia, the first thing that you're likely to experience is something known as localized amnesia. Localized amnesia. And that's when you have difficulty identifying certain periods of time. An example of this would be, I have a hard time identifying that, between the ages of 12 and 16, that I was a fun, happy-go-lucky child. I have a hard time figuring out what happened between those two times, 12 and 16 years of age. It's unclear to you. It's all a blur. Okay, and you may have experienced this or heard somebody say, I don't remember my childhood. And that's typically because of the traumatic childhood. So your brain has kind of skipped over 12, 13, 14, 15, and it's gone to 16 because maybe 12, 13, 14, 15 is when you experience the most trauma. So the only thing that you can remember is 12 and 16. In between, forget it, because that was the most traumatic part of your life. And your brain kind of checks out. And when it checks out, it's not going to remember those stages. Okay, so localized amnesia. The next thing, guys, is something known as selective amnesia. Okay, and basically that means that you can, remember some but not all events. Okay, I can remember that my 2-year-old was at my birthday party the other day, but I can't remember that my dad was there. Okay, and I can't remember that because my dad was the most traumatic individual in my life that existed, because he beat us and he sexually molested us, and the list goes on. So all I can remember, this is an example, all I can remember is that my 2-year-old was there yesterday. I can't remember that my dad was there. Selective memory. Okay, selective amnesia. You can't remember certain details. The next thing, guys, is something known as generalized amnesia. Now, generalized amnesia means that, you can't remember all of your history. You have no idea where you came from, you have no idea what you're dealing with, and you definitely have no idea how to process certain things in your past. This is very rare, but it does happen. There's a movie I'm going to try to post in the description box below, and if I can find the title, I will put it over here. It's a movie about a woman who was jogging, and she was attacked and sexually molested, ended up in a psychiatric hospital. in a medical hospital as well, and she lost all consciousness of her history. She didn't know who she was, what she was supposed to be doing, who her husband was. She had no clue. So I encourage you to watch that movie. I think it's a very educational movie, so I'm going to try to find that for you. But that's generalized amnesia. I can't remember my history. I can remember certain details, but not all from my history. Or you can't remember the most important parts of your history. Okay, so generalized amnesia. Okay, so let's move on to the more specific and narrow kinds of amnesia that you could possibly experience if you're dealing with a trauma history or a childhood trauma. Okay, the next, semantic amnesia. Semantic amnesia. Basically, this is, I have memory and knowledge, but I don't have knowledge of my previous world knowledge. I have knowledge, but I can't remember what it is that I remembered or learned or became skilled at back there. I have absolutely no idea if I was smart back then, but I know that I understand what's going on now and in the future. I have no idea if I was knowledgeable in the past. I have no recollection, but I do know that I'm knowledgeable now and in the future. Okay? The next kind of amnesia is procedural. Procedural. That means that you have forgotten all skill that you have developed. All knowledge and skill and competency that you have developed, you completely forget it. I forgot how to ride a bike. I forgot how to skate. I forgot how to drive. I forgot how to play the piano. I forgot how to play basketball. Right? Procedural knowledge. You've forgotten all skill that you developed in the past. The next kind of amnesia is something known as continuous. And that means that you're unable to form new memories, right? You're unable to continue forming new memories. You may have some memories from the past, but that's about it. You can't form memories of the present moment or in the future. It's not likely to happen. The next is what's called microamnesia, and that's when you have very short periods of amnesia, and it's really hard for you to keep up maybe in remembering something that happened 15 minutes ago because you completely lose all recollection of what just happened. You have no ability to hold that in your mind for a long period of time. Maybe you can hold it for a second, maybe you can hold it for 5 minutes, boom, then it's gone. It's like it erases. Phineas Gauge is a pretty popular individual in the world of pop psychology and in the world of Psychology 101 for college students and high schoolers. And Phineas Gauge is an individual who was a railroad worker, and he had a terrible accident that caused a pipe to go through. I can't remember what side, but it went through his eye, through his head, and through his brain. And one part of the brain that was essential for him is the frontal lobes. It's essential for all of us. The frontal lobes are right here behind the forehead, and what happens with the frontal lobes is it controls your personality, it controls your impulsivity, it controls your decision making, it also controls your higher order thinking, it's your sophisticated thinking. And so when he had this accident, not only did his personality change, but I believe he had traits of or symptoms of microamnesia. He would play the piano really, really well. Okay, so he could remember how to play the piano, but he could not remember what just happened 2 minutes ago. And it's like he's starting over from scratch all over again. He would play the piano and then forget and then go back and play it again. And I think, if I can find the documentary on Phineas Gauge, I believe he kept all his ability to play the piano. That might have been procedural knowledge or procedural memory. He could kind of hold in his brain how to play the piano, but he could not tolerate and figure out what happened 2 seconds ago. That wasn't able to be held in his mind. So that's microamnesia. Okay, very brief periods of memory. Outside of that, I can't remember anything. Okay, and it can be as short as a second. So it's a very complicated symptom of trauma. I'll put it that way. Okay, and the next thing would be systematized amnesia. Systematized amnesia. There's no memory of your family, who you are, who your husband is, who your wife is, who your cousin is. there's no ability to remember who you are and where you came from. There's a movie about this as well, where a young woman was sexually assaulted, and she was institutionalized from there, and she went home to try to live a normal life, but she couldn't remember for the life of her who she was or who her husband was. Had no idea she was a professor, had no idea her husband was a successful lawyer. So I'll try to post that in the description box for you as well. But these are all the kinds of dissociative amnesias or memory losses that you could have that has a psychological and emotional foundation. It's not physiological. It's more neurological and emotional and psychological, and it's really dealing with the psychology of who you are, and it's causing your brain to skip over experiences. It's causing your brain to ignore or smooth over certain things that you need. You need procedural knowledge, especially if you're a professor or you drive trucks for a living or you're the president. You need to be able to remember the skills that you've learned. You need semantic memory, which is, having that world knowledge of what's going on all around you. You have to have continuous memory, right? So that you can continue to remember things as you move forward. But when you lose all of that because you've had, a traumatic experience, it's very traumatic in and of itself. Trying to live a life with no recollection of what's going on from one minute to the next, or not knowing who you were in the past. It's a very lonely road. I've counseled a ton of clients like this, and it's really difficult for them to find a smooth foundation. It's very, very traumatizing, and quite traumatizing for the therapist, if I may say so myself. Thank you so much for being with me today, guys, in this video. Go ahead and give this video a thumbs up if it was helpful, and hit that subscribe button and bell button so you can stick around with us and so you won't miss any videos that I post coming up. I will see you guys in the next video. We're going to talk about fight or flight. See you then.